Welcome to the Think Act Be podcast. I'm Seth Gillahan. I have a really special guest for you this week. His name is Rob Bell. And I was so happy that I got to speak with Rob. I've been a fan of Rob's work for quite a while now. I listen to his podcast all the time, and I've just found his work so helpful. The things that he's written, the ideas that he shares, and actually had an opportunity to spend a couple days at the Rodale Institute, about an hour from where I live here in southeastern Pennsylvania. And Rob hosts these events where about 30 people come and we all bring an issue, a question, something we're stuck with or struggling with and having a hard time moving through. And then one by one, we each sit and talk with Rob, and the rest of the group observes. And it's hard to describe exactly what happens. I think this is everyone's experience of these gatherings, but something happens. And it seems like for everyone who's there, something kind of shifts, something opens up. That's definitely what happened for me this past July when I participated. So it was great to speak with Rob. We focused mostly on his really cool new book called Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? An Interplanetary Tale of Love, Loss, and Bread. And this is different from anything that Rob has written in the past. Most of his books have been about theology or spirituality in a more kind of obvious way. Books like Love Wins, which is really excellent. I strongly recommend it. And this one was, so first of all, it's a novel, and it was just a lot of fun. From what you'll hear in our conversation, it was fun to write and just really fun to read. I definitely recommend it. Even if you're someone like me who doesn't typically read books that are classified as science fiction, it's just such a human tale. So Rob and I talked about what it was like for him to write the book, and some possible parallels between the types of things he writes about and some of his own experiences. And we talked about the possibility of moving beyond doing everything out of a sense of have to, and instead starting to approach things where things that we feel drawn to, going where the energy is, instead of forcing ourselves to do the things that we've always been expected to do or always expect ourselves to do, or the things that we might have done in the past and think that we're always supposed to do. But maybe there's this other possibility. Maybe we can do things just because they bring us alive, just because they're enjoyable, just because we feel like that's where our hearts are leading us. Rob is the New York Times bestselling author of 14 books and plays, which have been translated into 25 languages. His visual art can be seen on Instagram at Real Rob Bell. His band is Humans on the Floor, of course it is. And his podcast is called The Robcast. Rob lives with his family in Ojai, California. Speaking of Ojai, if you have a chance to be in Ojai, Rob hosts these 2-day events. I think they're typically on a Saturday and a Sunday, like they were for me. If you're able to get to one of them, I definitely recommend it. If you find that you're at a place where it could be helpful to talk with someone and get input on things where you're feeling stuck. I imagine that as adults, that's at some point that's kind of all of us. So I'm really happy to share this conversation with you. Thanks for listening. Well, Rob, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining me.
It's great to be with you.
Well, I am really looking forward to discussing your new book, Where'd You Park Your Spaceship, which I'll just be honest, I left a review on Amazon and said something to this effect. I'm not usually I don't think of myself as someone who reads books about like interplanetary tales, right? So science fiction or that sort of thing. But I loved this book and read it really quickly for me. Um, and so I'm looking forward to talking with you not just about your book, but also about, I'm interested in the person behind the book because I think there's a lot of Rob Bell in there.
You write a book about other planets, and interview after interview, people are like, "This is your most personal book yet." I'm like, "Okay, I give up. I give up. I don't know how anything works."
So one quick question I have for you is the $23 price tag for the book, retail price. Is that a coincidence? Knowing that your birthday is August 23rd, I just wondered.
I didn't know that it was 23. Fascinating.
Ah, okay.
People somewhere, the Empire somewhere picks those numbers.
The chairs decided.
That's great. I had no idea. Once again,
Yeah.
just stuff just doing its own thing.
Didn't it come out on August 23rd? No, yeah, on August
Mhm.
23rd.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then apparently started getting it. People started getting it earlier, and thinking they were on some sort of insider access thing. Which, once again, let's just enjoy that.
Right. Yeah.
Apparently, you are. Who am I to say you aren't on some sort of rush
Right.
shipment program? I don't know.
Man. So, and quick question of clarification. I don't remember, is it different galaxies or different planets within the galaxy? Not that it matters.
So the interesting thing at this moment is, and this has already happened a couple times, a person asks a question like that, and there's choose your own adventure. I can say, Seth, it's just all made up. You realize that, right? Or I can say, actually, it's nested holons in which galaxies exist within galaxies, but there's a special flux capacitor that allows one to travel between them. See what I mean? Like I can,
Right.
because I had somebody ask a technical question about how something worked, and I had this exact decision. So I just made a very straightforward technical explanation back, like, well, da 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 da, just made something up. And they were like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean?
That makes sense. I see what you did. Okay.
Like it just somehow that satisfied, like, oh, okay, got it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
I got it.
Well, an interesting thing about reading it, and I imagine about writing it, is that wherever it's happening, you have this very outside perspective because this is a post-Earth universe at this point. And so the characters will make these observations about like our society now in a way you're like, oh, huh. Yeah, like one character says as they're looking back on what did people on Earth do? Well, one thing they did is they took pictures, a lot of pictures. What do they take pictures of? Mostly of themselves. Huh. And then they posted them for other people to look at.
And you could see pictures of somebody you didn't know, and people who didn't know you could see like what you had for breakfast. And you could send people pictures of what somebody you don't know and they don't know had for breakfast.
Right.
He's just describing it, and the kid and Heen is like, "What? Wait." He's like, doesn't even really believe when his dad's explaining this. He's like thinking that his dad's like making this up.
Right.
He's like, wait.
And Heen, for our listeners, is the main character of this book. Heen grew -bears. And one of the other things that they discover about this Earth is that for example, there was vast disparity in wealth in a way that the future, these Heen grew bears and his classmates just couldn't wrap their heads around. Like, seriously? And people were okay with this? Like, some people had nothing and other people had, more homes than they could take care of? Really?
Yeah. Because right from the get go, you're in Heen's head, and he's studying Earth unit in school. Like, it's almost like at one point where he's like, I don't know much, but that's like insane.
Right.
Just he's super casual, or like they deserved it. He has like this, whatever, 9-year-old, like, oh, please.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess one of the upshots of that, those observations about what was wrong on Earth is this new society decides to create a very curated experience, a very curated universe in a way where there's a floor and a ceiling. Nobody has too much, nobody has too little. But it goes beyond that. It goes, I don't want to give away too much in the book, but really trying to limit the types of negative experiences we might have, or shut out certain types of things and decide, well, this shouldn't exist in our universe, and so we're going to do something about that. It sounds kind of utopian in the beginning, like all
Good,
right, yeah,
good, good, good,
seems better, and then
good.
not surprisingly, turns out there's a wrinkle.
Yeah, I really like that. And like urban planning and sort of the way in which like how architecture works and education. Yeah, you're like, oh, they could start from scratch. So they like built a new thing like you do if you could build from scratch. And then you start to realize, oh, got it. Got it. It's like that. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that. And then you'll have another set of things.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it really, as you were describing in the beginning, and for a lot of the book, it seemed like that is just so smart. Like, why don't we do it this way? Even just the way things are arranged spatially. Like I think there's some things that are arranged in sort of like as like pieces of pie, where there's something in the middle.
Yeah, yeah, his apartment. Yeah, which is
Right.
like
It's just so
his
smart.
flat
Yeah,
that literally expands as you walk into it.
that's right. Yeah.
And then yeah, yeah, and how he like his first job when he is trying to understand what this team of people do who are making the new circle,
Yeah.
and where his mentors Spy V will just sit and stare
Mm,
at these lines that are where the buildings are going to go. And then all of a sudden it dawns on him one day that like a street and an intersection, a path, because they don't really have streets, is a feeling. And when you put buildings together, it creates a space. The buildings create a thing among them. And
mm.
yeah, you see him like, what are we doing? Oh,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like the opposite of urban sprawl,
Right.
like really intentional. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
So it's fascinating also to me to just how Heen's just talking about, like, the library is the biggest building in the circle, obviously. Like,
right.
all the things that he states, like, of course, uh, that to me, that really was compelling to me to I kept noticing how just him describing it didn't need anything more than him just giving these little asides about, I don't know, why else would you do it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just obvious. And it seems like that extends well, maybe in a lot of ways to Heen's emotional experience, which, he tries to, or maybe not even tries to, but finds himself kind of shutting himself off from certain types of emotions. There's one line you had where he talked about how he tended to just reflexively analyze things and notice in a way that kind of took him out of the experience. And so he said, so I won't have to feel whatever it is in its fullness.
Mhm.
So I don't want to assume that you are Heen, but is that something you could relate to, or
Well, I do love that, like, 300 pages in, he's like, "I think I'm kind of numb." I you know what I mean? And I absolutely, oh god, it made me laugh so hard when he starts noticing, wait, he has this sort of, "I think I'm the best Series 5 in the universe. I think I might be the best." And I go back for these, like, sort of training updates, and I look around the room, almost like I look around the room with these chumps, like, I think I and then as it gradually begins to dawn on him, I think that I'm really good at my job for some not so good reasons, right? It's like, I think I'm emotionally kind of dead, which is why I'm so good at my like, he just what does it take, like, 400 pages for him to gradually connect these dots and And then Nunez shows up and is like, I read your report. You're like really good, but wow, do you miss so much? Like, what are you gonna tell me next? I'm wearing black pants? Like, she's just from the get-go, like, yeah, 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 you're like, aren't seeing it. So that to me was very interesting. I don't, yeah, I stopped. I have no idea. All because people have. There's been, yeah, lots of people that I've done these interviews with have wanted to explore which one. Like a friend of mine read it and he was like, got really frustrated. He was like, I spent the whole thing trying to figure out which character you are. And it got him all, and then he just put it down and just like walked away.
Right.
And then he sent me this long email that he later picked it back up and he was like, oh, you're like all the characters, none of the characters. I don't know how, seriously, I have no idea how any of that works.
Right. Yeah, there were times early on when I was like, "Oh, this sounds like the voice of Rob Bell." Then I was like, "Oh, but I also see him here." So it seems like
But it's
you're
coming from a female assassin who just arrived
right.
in a spaceship. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's one of the great uh, twists on all of it is you know that you're the events and aches and pains and joys of life. It's like you're informing this whole thing because no one else is writing it,
right,
but then you're also a story only works if you're completely surrendered to uh narrative. Like, trying to think how to say it. Like if you watch a movie and that has a point, you're like, oh God. You're like, oh,
yep,
be nice to people who aren't like you. Ugh, it's so on the nose. You just check out. A story only works if you're caught up in a story and seeing where it goes. So writing it, if it was like, okay, this is my point here, the whole system just jams up. You can't do a thing.
totally.
It's like literally. So when Keen and Nunez, when they go to Lying's school, and there's the scene in the ravine where she gives that bread is magic speech.
Yes,
I don't know what she's going to say.
right.
I'm, and that was probably 3 or 4 days of just being in that ravine,
Mm,
like looking around, like who does that the kid Dune when he picks a volunteer? Oh, who does he pick? Kixie Flu. Of course he picks Kixie Fluger. Why is that scandalous? Oh, because it's like it only works to follow what is the most compelling, riveting thing, and then later you go, yeah, I guess I am. I guess probably I am in there somewhere, like the subconscious. It really was like an introduction for me. Introduction, how do I say it? Yeah, yeah. It was like a whole new kind of introduction to the subconscious or the unconscious or the
right,
yeah, like almost somewhere between the state you and I are in right now and a dream, where the mind is sort of asleep and yet something is, well, you're versed in all this. Something within me is making short films and
right,
and playing them, and something else within me is watching those short films. And then I wake up and tell somebody, you wouldn't believe what was in the short film while I was sleeping.
right.
It's like almost like splitting the difference between that and the state you and I in right now.
Yeah.
Very
Mm.
interesting.
Another thing that stood out is the scene where Heen is interested in this new opportunity, and he goes to is it a library? He goes in
Yes. Yeah.
and so they're like, yeah, we were expecting you, and you're the person for the job, and he's bewildered, of course, and he says, why me? And the answer basically is because you're interested, because you're the one who
Yeah.
answered.
Curiosity, that's half of it right
Hmm.
there.
Which it seems very familiar to me from just messages I've heard from you, to others about, well, why are you allowed to do something? Well, because you want to. Like maybe that's enough. And I wonder if that fed into your own willingness to do something you'd never done before. I think write a book like this. Why? because you're interested, because you want to.
In some ways, that's all you got.
Mm,
I mean, you can do debt, duty, obligation, reward. Yeah, you could do that. That's fine. But it's like I'm sure in your work, you just at some point you see enough, you observe enough about your own life and the lives of those around you that like plays itself out. Okay, we did that.
yeah.
So you begin noticing what were the moments, almost like what were those moments in life when I wasn't seeking or I wasn't even wondering what my purpose is. What are all the moments past all that where it's just, yeah, that was great.
Mm,
That was like living. Probably moments you were following something you didn't even quite know what it was.
right.
Might even have been quite difficult to articulate at the time. And yet it was as real as any extrinsic sort of reward or acknowledgement. Yeah, yeah. I would say that when I look back, that's kind of how it's worked. Yeah, it has actually how it's worked since the early 20s, my early 20s. So you're like following something and then something comes to an end and something new arises and it's like, let's follow that.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, speaking of the subconscious and kind of realizing things about your writing, were there things that you look back on when you read it and you're like, oh, wait a second, like things that you were expressing or things about yourself that were in the book that you didn't realize you were just following the story?
Yeah, yeah. There were, yeah, the like that feeling when it jumps ahead in time and he's a couple of decades, most of his adult life, he's been flying around a spaceship, around doing this job where he's recounting for you. I go and then I leave. I go and then I leave. Like an existential loneliness. So the abyss, the void, so deep in the bones, you can't. It's unnameable.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I can see where I was articulating a feeling that I have had and I have heard others speak of, where you can be surrounded by people you love, you can be doing something you love, you can be surrounded by large crowds, you can be in beautiful spaces, you can whatever, whatever. And yet there are abyss moments
mm,
when you're having a slice of pizza and you watching the cars go by and you're like, this is like a ball hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour with a perfect balance of oxygen that somehow allows me to like those moments um, that are this sort of like a yeah, like an existential shudder.
mm.
I can see where I was giving that and it like naming the unnameable,
Uh,
which obviously a lot of well, a lot of my work was like, hey, everything's great. We're fine. We're good. You can do it. Love wins. So a guy who right off the bat experiences horrific loss. Yeah, I could see where I was giving expression to things I hadn't done before.
yeah.
It's important for me. It's important for me to say denial has been my drug of choice
Mm,
over the years.
right.
Just keep going. Da, da, da. Hey, everything, we're great, man. Here we are. Look at this. What a wonder and awe.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't you once say you're an Enneagram 7 with a 7 wing?
7 with the 7 wing. So my sort of grounding, centering, healing, whatever you want to say, is always about acknowledging what my instincts want to glide over the surface of.
Mm, yeah.
Like, and so as you get better at sort of spotting it over time. But I remember the first time someone was like, "There's this thing called the Enneagram." They were doing the numbers. I did not. I did not relate to it on like it was not aspirational for me. Like, ooh, I'd like to be one of those. It was like, oh, I know the I know the pain of that number.
Uh,
Yeah, and actually, Kristen often says that. She's like, uh, somebody will say what number they're out. She'll be like, oh, notice. She's like, ah, nah, I don't think they're that number. Why? She's like, because that's what they want to be.
right.
But the way you find your way in is the thing where you're like, ooh, ooh, I know that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I wanted to be a 5. Now I don't really think I am.
It's like the number where you like can feel the gut punch, but then it's yeah, and that was massive in my life. To be like, oh, I remember around that time, and of course the seven with the seven wing is a seven joke about the Enneagram. So even then you have to joke about it. But I remember it opened me up. It was like, oh, it helped me understand so much. And I remember saying to Kristen, I just don't I started feeling things I hadn't felt, honestly. And I'd be like, "Wow, I woke up this morning, I don't just wanna go out there and change the world." And she would say, like, "Welcome to how most of us feel all the time." So in answer to your question, I can see now all of the, I wanna say, feelings that are happening in the book that I had never written about, and you don't write about them. My work has for 30 years been straightforward. Like, can we come in the front door? This is what the point is. This is my other point. This is how they relate to each other. Here's an example. Here's an illustration. Here's a metaphor. Here's an analogy. Here's the thing I just said, s- slightly different.
Right.
And there was something about setting that explaining is a particular kind of energy. It engages the mind in a particular
Mm.
way, like that parsing energy, that pattern recognition energy. And there was was like a It's like an invitation to set that aside. And it was and to give myself permission just, "Yeah, you did that for a long time, that's great. You wanna do something else?"
Mm. Wow.
And it was a really, really I had to sit for days with the permission giving because it just kept every bit that I, like, followed it, another layer was peeled on. Is it okay? Like, almost like a child, like an innocent, tender, can I just follow this story?" I'm literally making notes in my clothes closet. There's like filled up, I don't know how many pages of notes about this story. Can I just give this what it's asking for and just see where it goes?
Yeah.
I mean, and something about all those years of explaining that was like almost like a kid going, can I like just do something else now? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Am I done now? Is that enough?
I mean, and the tricky thing is when the previous chapter it was good,
Yeah.
wonderful life, but yeah, I'd like to do this now. And then I would like I remember showing an early draft, a 750-page early draft, to which Kristen said, "Rob, not everybody 750 is a good number." But, I remember sending it to a friend, like, "Hey, will you just take a look at this for me?" He reads the whole thing, which is the definition of a friend. And he's like, "Hey, that other stuff you're doing, that was helpful. I like those other books, but this is what it's like, uh, to be your friend."
Mm. Yeah.
So it was like oh, the thing that I'm feeling, this people that know me are like, "Yeah, yeah, that thing that you're feeling is real."
Mm. Yeah, that sense of relief with the permission to do something different is so to me, it was so it was expressed so clearly in Heen's reaction to the chairs or to the invitation to do this new job, like, you just like, I don't have to keep doing what I've been doing. I can do something different, and it was I think like a lot of the book, it's not described in these kind of like overly emotional terms, but just there's something about the way it's described where a lot of emotion inheres in it. It's very moving.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because there was this really interesting editorial decision. So I was like, should it open when Nunez shows up in his room? And it's just like, wait, what? There's a trained assassin in my room. Wait, there's going to be a graining. What? And then just give you just enough skeletal details so that you're into the action.
Yeah.
But I just, no, you got to no. I remember just so like, no, you got to go with this guy.
Mhm.
Like, and if a reader is like, where's the action? Nothing's happening. Like, I don't know. I think people dying is enough. But it was like, no, whatever it like right away, it was like, no, this is what this is. So even the like suspenseful novel or whatever, like even those sort of mental constructs of what I'm writing,
Mm,
it was like, you're not doing that. You're not doing that. You're doing something. Like just listen to what it is.
man. I
So
imagine.
I haven't read sci-fi. Well, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Otherwise, I don't I don't have any training in writing. I don't know anything about anything. So it was like there was something about beginner's mind and not having like awareness or skills or there's a third act or this protagonist. I don't know anything about any of that. So it was just what is this?
Mm,
What's happening next? Who do we meet here? What do they say?
right.
It's like just boom, boom, boom. Yeah.
It's, well, I have to imagine for you, it's a relief to have pulled it off so well, to have written such a good book. Because I know just for me as a reader, it was a relief. I mean, not only because it's 545 pages or so, but also because I'm going to be talking with you about it, and it's much easier to say I loved a book if I love the book, right? Which I did, and I mean, I know you're a good writer, obviously from the books of yours that I've read, and you've had a lot of success as a writer, like Love Wins, which you mentioned, and The Zimzum of Love, and many others. But it is remarkable that you wrote, I mean, such a good, big novel, having not been, trained or really experienced in that. And it seems like it is a testament, I mean, to your skill as a writer, but also to your willingness to go where the book was leading, it seems. You weren't trying to
Somebody was
write
like,
a good book.
this great question you might enjoy. Somebody recently, she said, okay, it happens. They do have spaceships. There are other planets, but what makes this science fiction? And I was like, I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy. It's like, I, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. When I started right away, there was a moment when Nord Heen's childhood friend writes a play, and the play, I was like, what's the play called? Oh, What's a Nucka, which is a play I wrote and published. So there was like a moment, and I always laugh thinking that moment when I was like, do I literally have a character write a play that is a play that is like out there and just somewhere NPR is rolling its eyes? You know what I mean? Like, oh God, that's just so oh please. But it was like just an endless series of, but that's how we do this. Like we're in on the joke. It was just like every single next move was to get everything off the shoulder. And then there was a moment of like, oh, this is book one. Yeah, this is book one because we're gonna need to do that. And then we're gonna need to show people this. Then we're gonna need. Then of course, like, uh, it was once again the permission, even knowing that this has all these Easter eggs in it that later, um, can you can you just do that? Can you just set out to do that? Yeah, I guess you can.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's rubbish, it's rubbish. And if no one ever sees it, no one ever sees it. I remember coming into the house and telling Kristen, I know you, it appears like I'm doing my jobs, but I'm doing those like what I'm normal work. I'm doing that like in the edges and breaks and weekend. I'm actually writing this book called Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? And it's like, I can't, I used to be able to write like 2 hours at a time most, but I was like, some days I'm going like all day and the pages are coming like I haven't written for a lot of years. And this is like an entirely different thing. And I don't know if it's ever going to be published. And I don't know if anybody cares. And I don't know if it's just crap. And she's like, yeah, how else would it work?
Mm.
I mean, she just had like, just very straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah. How else would it work?
How long did it take you to
Okay.
write the first 750-page draft?
6 months.
Wow.
And I've never done like, the writing for me has never had like a, like 9 to 5. Like honestly, a couple hours of sitting still and I'm like, can I go out and play?
Yeah.
Let's go do something. But this was a whole different thing.
Mm.
Yeah. It made me, yeah, I had to rethink. Yeah. Wait, this is possible? This is great. Yeah.
There's a strong theme in the book of liberation, of, I think it's a big part of Heen's arc, is being liberated from ways he holds himself back, from outside control, from expectations. Again, coming back to the writer, to what extent do you identify with that sense of liberation, even in the writing of this book? I mean, the reason I ask is because, there's another aspect to that, not just liberation, but defiance, a kind of like, maybe I don't have to do that anymore. And I wonder if this book, in a way, maybe it's the psychologist in me over interpreting this, but it feels like the book itself is maybe in some way an act of defiance.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Or yeah, the fluid nature of identity itself. Like how the I just clings to the title, this is, or this is my expertise, or we cling and grasp to these senses of self wherever we can get them.
Hmm.
And so they're like, prop us up and they feel good. And then they're also like little prisons with door handles on the inside.
Yeah.
So can you just do something else? Well, I am doing something. So let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. Well, you were here in Ojai for those 2 days.
Hi, you saw me
Right.
in Rodale because it was close.
In
to
Rodale.
home.
Rodale.
Yeah.
You were at Rodale. So you watched and I'm sure your work, and then you watched people sitting there going, yeah, I guess I could actually do that.
That's right.
Like you just watch people just setting. It's almost like the person sits down and you just wait to see what's asking to be set down.
Right.
And then we just sit in enough silence that they begin to listen to what's emerging, and
Hmm.
that, oh, you're right. I could try that. Yeah.
Yeah. An emotion that I'm exploring more for myself is anger. It's not one that I've that experienced with or that I recognize easily in myself, unless it's really apparent. So I'm curious in any reflections you have on Heen's experience of anger in this book. It doesn't seem like he's not like breaking stuff in rage, but it does feel like there's this sort of undercurrent and like a growing sense of like, wait a second, that he's starting to act on.
Yeah, and he has almost like, I played by the rules.
Yeah.
I gave you my best years. Like
Yes.
this thing that was like a way out, that gave him this structure and gave him a life, is got himself jammed into a corner, and he's starting to actually feel for these people. But oh yeah, he's getting stretched all over he's enough of a wreck because he's starting these people in this bakery. He keeps going, like, he keeps weighing in on conversations about stuff, and then he'll be like, I would never have said, what am I doing?
Right.
He's like contributing to these conversations going, wait, what is happening to me? Then Nunez shows up and it's almost like, oh God, I had enough. I had enough anguish, but this is actual, like, serious anguish. Oh yeah, some serious anger, like, yeah, real. And then he's out breaking those tree stump things, and he's like, it's almost like at first he doesn't even know where to place it.
Right.
It's just a raw, amorphous rage with, and he can kind of, and then I love how every time he tries to be like, and then you come here, and she's like, wait, do you think you're you're on my team? Like, who, you are in so deep that you think that I'm the outsider to you. What are you, like, I just love the profound disorientation where he doesn't side with anybody and he sides with all of them, and he's in this jam that he put himself in, but not really, that he didn't see coming. Oh yeah, that feeling of trapped, that feeling of like not enough oxygen.
Yeah.
Woo! And this poor fellow is just getting wrecked.
Yeah. And that realization that you think that you're living in a system, but then you realize that you've been building it. You've been creating
Oh,
that system.
and that moment when that bakery owner is gone and he's like, no, that's just a coincidence. Like,
Right.
my data isn't actually doing things.
Right.
Although his whole premise of the whole book is my data does things. I play my part. And then he's like, wait, this is my part?
Right.
Yeah. There's like that's like a crisis of the highest order. And you can see him dismiss it because we're always, all those cult documentaries that are like HBO just cranking them out. And you're always like, how do people do that? We're so fascinated with how people would ever get themselves in those situations. But then you watch him go, yeah, nah.
Right.
He just he follows it all the way down. He gets like a certain level and it's like, nope,
Yeah.
dismisses it and on his way.
Are you working on the second installment now?
What a great question. Yeah, yeah. We'll need to throw some curveballs everybody's way. I'm being thrown curveballs yeah.
Yeah.
We'll do some more. There's a lot more.
That's great. Yeah. Any idea when we might expect it? No pressure.
No. I learned a long time ago. I've already answered. I've already said. I learned a long time ago never to talk about a thing I'm working on. So I'm already in too deep. But I did call it. But this is the first time I called it book one. So
Yeah.
I was like, you're breaking all of your rules by calling it book one because you're like, you realize that if you call it book one, I remember having this, thinking that through, like, then that means there's a book two. So this is all new territory for me to be in.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah. Oh, didn't Douglas Adams write 4 books in his trilogy?
I mean, that's.
Which I'm guessing that was intentional, but maybe he thought he'd write 3 and then a 4th one popped out.
Well, that series and Douglas Adams, that's just, and it's so British.
Yeah.
So clever.
Well, Rob, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but where can I send listeners who want to learn more about you and want to get your book?
All that stuff is at my site, robbell.com.
Excellent. I'll provide a link there in the show notes to this episode. Title of the book, again, is Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? An Interplanetary Tale of Love, Loss, and Bread.
I love you reading it. That's fantastic. And I mean, you're a psychologist, correct?
Correct.
That's your chair?
Yeah.
I mean, do you read a book like that and you just see all kinds of stuff?
Yeah, even if it's not there, I might see stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that is great. That's great.
I mean, it's definitely true in my writing too, and I'll write things, And then I'll look back, even, years later, I'll read something and I'll be like, wait a minute, I'm saying something that 5 years ago, let's say, that I didn't know at that time. And I just learned it recently, but I knew it then because I wrote it, but I didn't realize what I was actually saying, like I was saying more than I realized. And I just think that's one of the coolest things about writing is that we write stuff, and we're expressing things we don't actually know on a conscious level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or you read a book and you're like, yeah, that was good. And then you read it a number of years later and like, wait, I've never read this chapter.
Right.
I didn't, what earlier me read through this and missed what did I think I was
Right.
reading?
What did I think this book was about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating. Fascinating how that works.
Yeah. It may be worth mentioning too, just how this book came about. I mean, the earliest origin of which I think is a series of dreams. Is that right?
It's like middle of the night, awake, almost like images, awake images somewhere between a dream and awake.
Mm.
There's this guy asking this guy, where'd you park the spaceship? And like, almost like in the middle of the night, just being like, what? Just laughing. But then I do remember the moment of like, well, how does he feel about this question? Like that being like the mind and the heart, this engaged with this image of this guy asking this guy, where'd you park your spaceship?
Right.
Like, well, how does he feel? Oh, he doesn't like, I remember thinking, oh, he doesn't like the question.
Right.
He doesn't. Well, wait, there's a spaceship. Are they on Earth? No. Okay, that's a whole story. Which you might find fascinating because I have a copy of the book right here. That initial question, which and almost like it built concentric circles. Well, how did we get to that moment and what happens after that moment? It just kept like building in each direction. And I remember when I first got the first hard, paper proof of it, and that question sits right in the middle physically
Oh, wow.
of the book. And this feeling that I had, like it was going earlier and it was going after, and it just kept doing this, is when you hold the book, how it sits.
Wow. And it just found its way there to the middle. Kind of like when if you balance something between your fingers and move them toward the middle, they just naturally find the middle point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much of this that I can't explain.
And I loved how that question worked its way into the book, like how it was asked, it's truly a pivotal moment. And then sort of how the whole thing unfolds from there. Oh, that's what that question is. There's a lot in that.
And it just hit me the other day that when he's terrified that his cover's been blown. This has never happened. But that was great talking to you.
Great talking to you too, Rob. It really seems like, thinking about your work, it feels like in different ways, all the things that I've read by you and the podcast when I listen to it, it seems like there's this really strong theme of opening your heart, encouraging others to open their hearts, whatever that means to each of us. And it seems like that's what this book is about as well. And it seems to me that it takes someone with a heart that's willing to be opened to write this kind of book. So, Rob Bell, thank you very much for all that heart-opening work you're doing. I've really been affected in a big way by your work, and thanks for sharing this time with me.
Thank you. My pleasure.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone you know who might find it helpful. It's one of the best ways you can support the podcast. I'd also be grateful if you could leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. I'd love to get your feedback. I release new episodes every Wednesday, so if you subscribe, you'll get the episodes as soon as they're available. If you'd like to become a supporting member, please visit sethgillahan.com/podcast-membership. Your support helps keep the Think Act Be podcast ad-free. And thank you for listening.